Welcome to the Book Voices channel. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with our latest book discussions. Now let's dive into today's book.
Right, so you guys sent us a ton of stuff on improving interpersonal communication skills.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff.
And we really want to help you pull out those golden nuggets that you can actually use.
Right.
Right? Like, how can you walk away from this and be better at connecting with people and be more successful, in your relationships, in your career?
Absolutely.
So we've got excerpts from Leil Lowndes, How to Talk to Anyone.
Yes.
And so we want to really dig into those and help you guys understand the core ideas so you can put those into practice.
Yeah.
Whether you're at a party, or you're at some kind of networking event, or even just on the phone,
Yeah.
just have a conversation.
Right.
There's some really cool stuff in this. And, we're going to talk about this idea that you can actually change your body language just by thinking about somebody as an old friend.
Mm.
And this fascinating concept of using anatomically correct empathizers.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, that sounds crazy.
It's a great book.
Yeah. So let's jump in. Let's get started with first impressions.
Yeah.
Because we all know first impressions are so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's, I think it's 10 seconds. Leil Lowndes talks about this 10-second audition.
Oh, yeah.
Where, when you meet someone in the first 10 seconds, they're subconsciously making a decision about whether they want you in their life or not. It's kind of a stark way to put it, but it shows how important those first few moments are. And what you want to be communicating is, wow, I really like you.
Right.
That's the feeling you want them to have.
But how do you project that?
Exactly.
Right, without saying a word.
Well, there's this really cool technique. She calls it the hello old friend technique. And this is where you meet someone new and you imagine that they are a long-lost friend. Maybe a favorite client you haven't seen in years or someone you just hit it off with instantly in the past.
I love this.
And what happens is that internal feeling starts to create this domino effect. Your eyebrows soften a little bit, your posture changes. You generally just become more open and approachable. And the book even talks about a study from Adelphi University showing that when you act as if you like someone, you actually tend to start liking them for real. And then the other person picks up on that positive vibe and reciprocates. And it's interesting, I was thinking about this. It's like whether or not you're consciously employing this technique, just that idea of your internal state changing how you're perceived by other people.
Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Your inner positivity.
Yeah.
It just radiates outward.
Absolutely.
So, okay, we've got the positive.
Right.
We've got the warmth.
Yeah.
But then there's the flip side of that, which is limit the fidget.
Yes.
Which is makes perfect sense if you think about it. The little movements we do
Right.
can really undermine
Yes.
our credibility.
And the book even mentions the Nixon-Kennedy debate in 1960. And a lot of commentators, after the fact, thought that Nixon appeared so nervous and fidgety that it made him seem less trustworthy than Kennedy, who was very composed. And so, the big takeaway here is just being mindful of unnecessary movements and especially keeping your hands away from your face.
Oh, yeah.
Because those little things can make people think that something's off.
Yeah, I've heard that too. If your hands are around your mouth.
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to
block the words.
Yeah, block the truth or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got limit the fidget. Now tell me about the big winner, head jerk.
So this refers to this tiny little head movement that people make when they feel a surge of happiness or confidence.
Okay.
And the book says, people who are really successful, they tend to carry themselves with their head tilted up just a tiny little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you practice this, just lift your head slightly, shoulders back. You project this air of assurance, and that makes a really strong impression.
That's so interesting. I wonder if that's a chicken or the egg thing.
Yeah.
If you were successful, then you feel more confident.
Right.
Or if it's the other way around.
I don't know.
Interesting food for thought. So, okay.
Yeah.
So now we've made a great first impression. We've walked into the room.
Yeah.
But what about navigating, you're at a party or you're at some kind of, industry event.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that whole environment?
Well, there's this technique called rubberneck the room. And the idea is when you first walk into a party, you take a moment to really look around. Notice who's talking, to whom are there little groups that have formed. What's the overall atmosphere of the room? You're on a reconnaissance mission to decide where you want to focus your energy and who you might want to connect with. Yeah. And this ties into, taking on the mindset of be the chooser, not the chooser.
I like that. Be the chooser, not the choosy.
Yeah.
So it's not just like standing there awkwardly,
Right.
hoping somebody will come up to you.
Exactly. You decide who you want to talk to, and you make it happen.
I like that.
And then, once you do decide to approach someone, you want to use this thing called come hither hands.
Oh, come hither hands.
What's that? So it's a subtle thing, but it makes a big difference. It's about keeping your wrists and palms visible to signal that you're open and receptive.
Yeah.
You know, if you think about it, if you're pointing your knuckles at someone, it kind of creates this invisible barrier.
Oh, yeah.
So you want your hands to be open and welcoming.
It's like you're saying, come here.
Exactly.
I want to talk to you.
Right.
Interesting. Okay, so we're talking to people now.
Yes.
But how do we make those people feel like we really care about what they're saying? Like we're really paying attention?
Yeah. Well, that's where tracking comes in. And this is so easy, but so powerful. The idea is that you remember small details that the other person shares with you. Maybe they mention their morning coffee routine or a minor issue they're dealing with at work, and then later in the conversation, you reference it. The book compares it to, everyone wants to feel like they're the star of their own movie, and every detail of their life is important. So by tracking these little things, you're essentially treating them like that star, and it makes them feel seen and heard.
Yeah.
It shows that you're actually listening and you care about what they have to say.
Yeah. It's the opposite of like when you're talking to somebody and you can tell that they're
Not really there.
not present.
Right.
They're just waiting for their turn to talk.
Right.
Okay, so we've navigated the party. We're being good listeners.
We're tracking.
But now let's get to the heart of it all,
Okay.
which is the actual conversation.
Right.
How do we master the art of conversation?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I love that Leil points out is this idea of prosaic with passion. She says that the way you deliver your message, the tone of your voice, your energy, your enthusiasm, that's often more important than the actual words you're saying, especially when you're first getting to know someone. And she mentions Senator Hayakawa in the book and how he was known for making these really strong connections with people just by being incredibly sincere in his interactions. And I think the big takeaway here is that, yes, you want to be genuine in what you're saying,
Right.
but it's really how you say it that matters most.
Yeah, I feel like I've experienced that too. Where it's like, even if what somebody's saying isn't the most fascinating thing in the world,
Yeah.
but they're so enthusiastic about it that it's like,
It draws you in.
it draws you in. Yeah, okay, so you don't have to have like the perfect opening line or anything.
No, not at all.
It's more about the feeling.
It's the feeling.
But what about opening lines?
Okay.
What if you're like me and you don't really have like a go-to?
Well, she talks about this thing called a what's it.
What's it?
Yeah, it's some unique object or characteristic about you that naturally sparks curiosity and conversation. Like in the book, she gives the example of someone who always carries around these Greek worry beads. And people are just naturally curious, so they ask about them. And it provides this easy opening for conversation. It's like a built-in icebreaker.
Like a conversation magnet.
Exactly.
That's so cool. Okay, so what about when people ask you that question?
Oh, yeah.
The dreaded, what do you do?
Right?
What do we say to that?
Well, she says, never the naked city. So you don't want to just give some short, bland answer like, I work in accounting.
Right.
You want to say something a little bit more intriguing, something that makes them want to ask a follow-up question. Give them a little bit of mystery. Make them want to know more about your story.
Ooh, little mystery.
Yeah.
I like that. And then once they're telling their story,
Right.
what do we do?
Be a sleuth on their slips of the tongue.
Be a sleuth.
Yeah, so you're paying attention to those little offhand comments or remarks that they make that might hint at a hidden interest or passion. And there's this great story in the book about this woman who worked at a nursing home, and she was trying to connect with this one resident, and she just couldn't figure out how to do it. And then somebody mentioned that the resident had said something about plants. Well, it turned out that this resident had been married to a gardener, and she knew everything there was to know about plants.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, they had this thing to talk about, and they were able to connect. So it just shows that, sometimes these little offhand comments can reveal so much about a person if you're really paying attention.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up the point about,
Mm-hmm.
really paying attention.
Yeah.
Because it's like we were saying before, it's so obvious
Right.
when you're talking to somebody and they're just like
Not present,
not present. Yeah.
waiting for their turn to talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, okay, we're having a good conversation now. We're
yes.
making people feel good. How do we really solidify that connection?
Well, one thing that Leil talks about is keeping the conversation focused on the other person, and she calls this selling yourself by talking about them. And this is the idea that, you can walk away from a conversation with someone and feel like you really connected with them, even if you don't remember that much about what they specifically said about themselves, because they made you feel like the most interesting person in the room.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think it's so true because I can think of like times when I've walked away from a conversation and been like, wow, that person was amazing.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait, what did we even talk about?
Yeah.
It's like they just had that ability to make me feel
You were the only person in the room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, now what about those times when the conversation maybe starts to lag a little bit?
Right. Well, there's this technique called parroting.
Parroting.
Yeah, or encore, she calls it in the book. And this is where you just repeat a few of the speaker's key words back to them, almost like you're prompting them to say more.
Uh-huh.
And it encourages them to elaborate and go deeper into the topic. And she does say, try to steer them towards stories where they come across well,
Right.
rather than dwelling on negative experiences.
Yeah, you want to keep it positive.
Exactly.
Okay, now the book also talks about this idea of endearing little flubs.
Yes.
What is that?
So it's basically the idea that while sharing your vulnerabilities can create intimacy and trust later in a relationship, when you first meet someone, they don't know you well enough to put those quirks or shortcomings into context.
Oh.
So it's best to kind of keep those personal details under wraps until you've built a stronger foundation.
I see.
Unless, of course, you're already a well-known figure, and then those little imperfections can actually make you seem more relatable.
Oh, yeah, like if you're already famous, then it's okay to be a little bit vulnerable.
Right.
Because it makes you seem human.
Exactly.
Let it.
And then finally, in terms of just like conversation strategy, she talks about having prepared pratter.
Prepared better.
Yeah. And this is just like you wouldn't go into an important presentation without some notes. It's good to have a few general conversation topics in mind when you're heading into a social situation so that you're not caught off guard.
Right.
You've got something to talk about.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've made a great first impression.
Yay.
We've navigated the party.
Yes.
We've mastered the art of
You
conversation.
do great.
But how do we take those initial connections and turn them into something more meaningful?
Well, Leil starts this section by talking about the benefit statement. And this is something that's used a lot in sales where you immediately explain how your interaction is going to benefit the other person. And she uses the example of a sales trainer who, when he introduces himself, instead of just giving his name, he talks about how he helps businesses increase their sales. So he's immediately establishing what's in it for the other person.
Yeah, he's leading with the value proposition.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, and then there's potent imaging.
Potent image.
And this is where you really tailor your vocabulary to align with the listener's interests or lifestyle. So if you know that they're into gardening, you might use metaphors like sowing the seeds of an idea or watching our collaboration blossom.
Oh, that's so smart.
Yeah, and if they're into boating, you could talk about an initiative navigating choppy waters or an idea that will really float their boat.
I love that.
So it's really about speaking their language, not just literally, but in terms of what resonates with their experiences and their passions.
It's so smart. Okay, now what about those awkward ums and ums that we all do?
Right.
When we're trying to think of what to say.
Well, she talks about this thing called anatomically correct empathizers.
Anatomically correct empathizers. That's a mouthful.
It is.
What does that even mean?
So instead of using filler words like or which can make you sound unsure, like you're not fully engaged, you use visual, auditory, or kinesthetic responses based on how the other person is expressing themselves. So if they say, the view was breathtaking, you might say, with a visual empathizer. It sounds like you really saw something incredible.
Going on.
And if they're talking about a feeling, you acknowledge that feeling directly. It shows that you're not just passively listening, you're actively understanding and connecting with them on their level.
Wow, so it's like you're really stepping into their shoes.
Exactly.
Okay, and then what about the power of using somebody's name?
Yeah, she calls this the name shower technique, and it's particularly effective in phone conversations because, when you're on the phone, you don't have those visual cues.
Right.
So using the person's name throughout the conversation can really help to create that personal connection. And, she says it's like a verbal caress.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so don't be afraid to use their name naturally throughout the conversation.
So like on the phone, definitely use their name.
Yes.
In person, maybe not so much.
Right.
Okay, got it. And this brings us back to that hello, old friend concept, but with a slightly different emphasis.
Right.
So it's not just about when you're meeting someone for the first time.
Right.
It's about like having that feeling internally.
It's about cultivating that internal feeling of warmth and anticipation as if you're reconnecting with someone you cherish.
Okay, so it's like a mindset shift.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in-person interaction.
Right.
But what about phone calls?
Okay.
Can't forget about phone calls.
No, absolutely.
Because, we're all on the phone all the time these days.
Right.
So what are some tips for better phone communication?
Well, the first one is, oh, wow, it's you.
Oh, wow. It's you.
Yeah, so the idea is that you answer the phone professionally, but then as soon as you hear who's calling you, let your voice just flood with genuine happiness and recognition.
Oh, okay.
Like your warmest smile was reserved just for them.
Like you're so excited that they called.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, now what about those times when you don't want to talk to somebody? Like you see their name pop up on your phone and you're like, oh, no, not now.
Well, she talks about the sneaky screen.
The sneaky screen.
Yeah.
What's that?
So this is where you have someone else answer the phone for you and say something like, oh, yes, I'll connect you right away. May I just take your name?
Oh, sneaky.
Yeah, so even if you're not available, the caller doesn't feel like they're being directly avoided.
It's like a buffer.
Exactly.
Okay, I could see how that would be useful.
Yeah, and then there's Barry's method, which is called, what color is your time?
What color is your time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is a really nice way to be respectful of the other person's time. He suggests asking the caller to indicate their availability as red, yellow, or green.
Oh.
Red meaning very busy, yellow meaning I can talk for a minute, and green meaning I'm free to chat.
Oh, that's so smart.
Yeah, so you're not catching them at a bad time.
It's so considerate.
Exactly.
Okay, now on the flip side of that, she talks about constantly changing outgoing message.
Yes.
So what's the deal with that?
So she just says, don't have these long, rambling, outgoing messages with inspirational quotes or lists of your accomplishments. Just keep it brief, professional, and to the point.
Okay, so no long-winded outgoing messages.
Right.
Short and sweet.
Exactly.
Got it. Now this next one sounds a little bit underhanded. The ho-hum caper.
Yes. This is where you casually use the pronouns he or she instead of formal titles when you're talking to someone's assistant or secretary.
Okay.
It's a way to imply that you and their boss are on a first-name basis or have a closer relationship than you might actually have.
So it's like a little power move.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, and then what about when you're on the phone with someone and you hear all this noise in the background?
Right.
Like dogs barking, kids yelling.
Oh, that's where I hear your other line comes in.
Okay.
And it's just about acknowledging those background sounds and asking if they need to attend to anything.
Okay.
It shows that you're aware of what's going on.
It's considerate.
Exactly.
And then finally, we've got instant replay, which sounds like a sports term.
It does.
So tell me about that.
This is just the practice of summarizing the key information or action items at the end of the call,
Oh,
just to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
to avoid any misunderstandings.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's phone calls.
Yes.
Now let's talk about parties,
Okay.
because she actually has a whole section called Working a Party, like a politician.
She does.
And she has this politician's 6-point party checklist.
Right.
What is that?
So it's basically combining a lot of the things we've already talked about. So you've got munching or mingling,
Okay.
which is don't get stuck at the food table. You want to be out there mingling.
Right. Prioritize the people.
Exactly. And then there's rubberneck the room.
Oh, right. Rubberneck the room.
The lay of the land.
Assess the situation.
Exactly. Then there's be the chooser, not the choosy.
Right.
You go after who you want to talk to.
Take charge.
Right? Then there's come hither hands.
Oh, yeah. Your friendly open hands.
Right. And then tracking. Remember those little details?
Make them feel special.
Exactly. And then she also includes the business card dossier,
Okay.
which is just a way to keep track of all the people you meet.
Oh, yeah. You got to have the system.
Right. And then there's eyeball selling.
Eyeball selling.
Yeah. This is where you use really strong eye contact to engage people and hold their attention.
Oh, like you're selling them on yourself.
Oh, exactly.
Just with your eyes.
Right.
Okay. I love that. So let's go back to a couple of those real quick.
Okay.
So munching or mingling basically means don't spend the whole party.
At the buffet.
The buffet. Yeah. Focus on the people.
Exactly.
Okay. And then rubberneck the room is even more important at a party
Yeah.
because there's so much going on.
You got to find your people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then come hither hands.
Yes. Keep those hands open and welcoming.
Yeah. Let people know you want to talk to them.
All right.
Okay. And then tracking is crucial
So important.
because it's so easy to feel like
Invisible.
invisible
Yeah.
at a party.
Especially if it's a big party.
Right. Okay. So now we've worked the party like a pro.
We have.
But what about those little things
Okay.
that really make a difference?
Right.
She calls these little tricks of big winners.
She does.
Tell me about some of those.
Okay, well, first one is see no bloopers here, no bloopers.
See no bloopers here, no bloopers.
Yeah, and this is about gracefully ignoring minor mistakes or embarrassing moments that might happen to someone else. So if they spill a drink or misspeak, you just don't react.
Okay.
You let it slide as if nothing happened.
Oh, so you make them feel comfortable?
Exactly.
You don't draw attention to it.
Right.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what about lend a helping tongue?
So this is about gently offering a word or piece of information that someone's struggling to recall
Oh.
without making them feel foolish.
Okay.
You're just helping the conversation flow smoothly.
Yeah, like if they can't remember somebody's name or something.
Exactly.
So just slip it in there.
Right.
Okay, and then bear, the buried YIFM.
So this is about being upfront about what's in it for the other person. Instead of trying to be manipulative or hide your intentions.
So just be honest.
Exactly.
Okay, and then let them savor the favor.
So this is when you do something nice for someone.
Hmm?
You don't downplay it or immediately expect something in return. You let them fully appreciate the gesture.
You let them enjoy it.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. What about tit for wait, tat?
So this is the idea that by not immediately reciprocating a favor, you actually increase its perceived value.
Oh, interesting.
It shows that your initial gesture was genuine
Right.
and not just a ploy to get something back.
It wasn't transactional.
Exactly.
Okay, so now she makes some distinctions between different social settings.
She does.
Parties are for prater
Yes.
and dinners for dining.
Right?
So what does that mean?
Well, parties are for prater means that parties are for light, casual conversation.
Okay.
And dinners for dining means that dinner is a more intimate setting where you should avoid controversial or unpleasant topics.
Okay. Keep it light at the party.
Exactly.
Keep it positive at dinner.
Right.
Okay, and then what about chance encounters or for chit-chat?
So this is just a reminder that those brief, unexpected meetings are best used for pleasant exchanges.
Okay.
You don't need to launch into a deep discussion.
Just a quick hello.
Exactly.
Okay, now this next one sounds really interesting. Empty their tanks.
Yeah, this is a great way to build rapport.
Okay.
It's about giving the other person the opportunity to talk at length about something they're passionate about.
Oh.
So you ask open-ended questions
Go.
and just listen.
Let them go.
Exactly.
Okay, echo the emo.
So this is about mirroring the other person's emotional tone.
Okay,
If they're expressing sadness or concern, you reflect that in your voice and demeanor.
I see.
If they're excited, you match their energy.
Okay, so you're being empathetic.
Exactly.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then my goof, your gain.
So this is about readily accepting responsibility even for minor errors.
Okay,
It can actually make the other person feel better about the situation.
so it's like taking the blame,
In a way, yes.
even if it's not really your fault.
Even if it's something small. Yeah.
Interesting.
And then leave an escape hatch.
Leave an escape hatch.
Yeah, this is about providing someone with a polite way to exit a conversation without feeling awkward.
Okay.
So you might offer a plausible reason for them to leave or gently change the subject.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
What about buttercups for their boss?
So this is about sharing positive feedback about someone with their supervisor.
Oh.
It's a great way to make them feel appreciated.
And it might help their career.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. What about lead the listeners?
So this is about guiding the flow of the conversation,
Okay.
keeping it engaging, knowing when to change the subject, and making sure everyone has a chance to contribute.
So you're kind of like the conductor.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay. And then finally, the great scorecard in the sky.
So this is a metaphor for the give and take in our relationships.
Okay.
It's a reminder that healthy relationships thrive on balance. And if you feel like you've taken more than you've given, you need to find ways to restore that equilibrium.
So it's like keeping track of the favors.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
What's the big takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that becoming a more effective communicator isn't about memorizing a bunch of rules.
Right.
It's about developing an awareness of those subtle human cues,
Yeah.
being more intentional in your interactions, and making the people you interact with feel valued and understood.
Absolutely. And I think these techniques really do offer a shortcut to building stronger connections.
I think so, too.
So for you, our listener, here's a final thought.
Okay.
Choose one or two of these techniques that really resonated with you and try them out in your next interaction.
Yes.
Really see what happens.
Observe the impact.
Because you might be surprised at what a difference these little things can make.
Absolutely. Mastering these seemingly small details can lead to big positive changes in your relationships and the opportunities that come your way. And, take some time to think about which of these techniques felt the most natural for you and which ones felt a little more challenging and why that might be. That self-awareness is so important.
Yeah, it's all about being mindful.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great deep dive.
It has been.
I hope you all learned as much as we did.
Me too.
And we'll see you next time.
See you later. Bye.